Hundreds of faithful, including clergy and laity, gathered early this morning in Washington, D.C. at the annual National Catholic Prayer Breakfast. The breakfast was founded as an answer to Pope St. John Paul II's call for a new evangelization. This year, they awarded Professor Helen Alvaré with the Christifidelis Laici Award, which highlights the good works of the laity who serve the church. Alvaré is the Robert A. Levy Endowed Chair in Law and Liberty at the Antonin Scalia School of Law at George Mason University. She's used her legal mind and pro-life prowess in her advisory roles to U.S. bishops and even the Vatican. After the overturn of Roe v. Wade, Helen joined us to share her wisdom about the next steps for the church on life. Let's take a look. Helen Alvaré, Professor and Associate Dean of Academic Affairs at the Antonin Scalia Law School, joins me now to discuss this more. Helen, thanks so much for being here. Throughout this episode, we've talked to legal experts and pro-life advocates who've laid out a pretty straightforward case that unborn children should be given equal protection under the 14th Amendment. In your view, if it's that simple, what factors are stopping the pro-life movement from embracing this avenue as a whole?
Right. I think there might be a couple of things. First, this is not our first rodeo on this question, and a lot of you are way young to remember this, but shortly after Roe versus Wade came down, there was a discussion of a human life amendment. We came achingly close to amending the Constitution to protect the unborn from abortion and other threats. And I think there is a fear that there would be a great deal of effort put into it and that it wouldn't succeed. So I think that is stopping some pro-life groups from doing it. I think there's also a good deal of political influence going on here. Everybody has noticed the number of articles that say, hey, Republican Party, slow down, chill. You might be scaring people off if you seek to protect the unborn for too many weeks, of their prenatal existence.
Right.
So, be reasonable, make sure there's plenty of weeks left to have an abortion. And I think some people who are thinking about this politically say, if we can't get people elected and we can't therefore get the right judges appointed, then actually we're shooting ourselves in the foot to be arguing for something that is such a broad protection for unborn life. So I think, again, to summarize, part is history, part is politics, and the fear that we couldn't get it done and maybe do some political damage. I think that's what those who are, slowing it down might be thinking.
Sure. And you talk about this aspect of history, and we know that obviously Roe versus Wade changed the way people think about abortion. Talk to me about this concept of so-called women's autonomy and how that's impacted the way people think about abortion, the killing of an innocent life.
Right. So first, it's obvious that whenever something is made legal, people think it can't be that bad. Everybody's allowed to do it.
Right.
Second, if you look at the language of Roe, but even more so, the campaign for legal abortion that it strengthened, what you see is Roe is full of a litany of women's woes for being pregnant and raising children. And it posited motherhood as some kind of zero-sum game where every gain for the child is a loss for his or her mother. And the language of autonomy, which, in its root means a law unto oneself, autonomous, became popular vis-a-vis, women's desire to be more free, the what was called at that time the women's liberation movement. But of course, and we can discuss this more in a few, the idea that we are laws unto ourselves or not completely mutually interdependent with others is simply not reality.
Yes. And some people in the pro-life movement bring up what they call the autonomy of the unborn child, Helen. But are babies in the womb really autonomous? I think we're hitting right on your point. They need their mother and father to survive even once they're born.
Right. I think what they're referring to there is the separate, independent existence that demands respect, right? And at the origin of respect for life is not killing, right? So I think when they use the language of autonomy for the unborn, that's what they're getting at. Really to hold up again what should be obvious, but we continue to have to hold up is this is human, this is alive, and must be respected.
Yes, yes. And Helen, advocates of the 14th Amendment say that establishing protections for unborn babies under the 14th Amendment is an originalist interpretation of the Constitution. And I know you're a legal expert. Can you just explain for our viewers what that means, to interpret the Constitution from an originalist perspective?
So this is an important argument, and I think it has legs. So to say that we make an originalist argument about the Constitution means that we ask, what was its meaning at the time that provision of the Constitution was enacted? 14th Amendment, that the state shall not deny, without due process, life to persons. The argument will be made that in 1868, when the 14th Amendment was passed, people understood the unborn child as life. In fact, scientists had discovered the events of fertilization, the female ova. In the early 19th century, we know that all the states, either right around 1868 or shortly afterwards, amended their abortion laws so that it protected human life from birth, from conception through birth and after. And this was true of the territories that came into the United States after the passage of the 14th Amendment. So in summary, the original public meaning of the word life in the 14th Amendment at the time it was ratified and in the years after, when people were expressing their understanding of it, would have included unborn human beings.
Right.
And that would be the originalist case.
And it makes a lot of sense. It seems that there are some differences, shifting kind of to, the political aspect of all of this, as you mentioned before. There are some differences of opinion among people in our movement about how to move forward. And while there are clearly people in our country who are either strongly pro-life or strongly pro-abortion, there are also a lot of people in the middle who might be ambivalent. How do we capture their support and really get them to care about this?
I have tried to think about this a great deal. The first thing is that the pro-life movement shouldn't be upset that there's differences of opinion. Before my time in it, during my time, and after my time, people have been disagreeing. But we should give each other credit for doing it in good faith and with the common aim of trying to extend protection to vulnerable life. So that would be my first point. Second, if we start engaging in the gamesmanship of what's politically acceptable, protect from conception, 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 15 weeks, I think we're playing on the wrong territory. To me, and I'm very inspired by Pope Benedict, who wrote about this, interestingly, in a book on interfaith relations called Truth and Tolerance, but he wrote about the abortion issue. And he said what I believe is true, and I think we need to communicate. The abortion issue is like a proxy for the whole question of whether we acknowledge that the very structure of human existence is interdependent, is relational. And I don't think we should speak about a law that protects unborn life without saying America or my state, if that's where you're arguing it. Abortion is really a conversation about whether we respect other human lives, whether in particular we respect vulnerable lives, whether we are willing to take responsibility for the lives given to us, whether childhood, motherhood, family, our future is of importance to us in the United States. And in this context of respecting reality, the interdependent, good Samaritan mutual care that is required for those strewn on our path, we ask you to consider our pro-life proposal. We ask you to consider extending protection to the unborn. America, my state, whoever we're talking to, that we would like to protect that life from its beginning, right? From its very beginning.
Right.
But we also will do what is feasible at this time with the understanding that we don't stop there. Right. That we do everything we can until we can convince you in this pluralistic democracy of the same respect for human life that we feel. I just think, Prudence, that a conversation about, which weeks or which protections that does not include an exhortation toward respecting, the structure of human life and our need for one another and our care for the vulnerable is not a winning conversation.
Yeah, well said. And I mean, that's really what makes this a human issue, right? Thinking of the other before ourselves. Helen, I have one more question before I let you go. There are 7 candidates who have announced they're running on the Republican side for president, and pretty much across the board, their stances on abortion are murky at this point. What would be your one piece of advice to them?
To do what I just described as saying to people, I'm pro-life. I would like to extend protection to all human life, but I also realize that I'm in a democracy, and I will go as far as I can go because that's who we are as Americans, people who appreciate the necessity of taking care of those strewn in our paths, Good Samaritan style. And I want to exhort you to go as far as you can go in that. And I will agree to protect life as far as we can in this democracy and always be exhorting you to greater care. Again, announce the principle. Tell people who you really think we are as Americans on our best day and try to bring them along with you.
Well said. Thank you so much, Helen. You are an asset to our movement, and we're so grateful for all the work that you've done on this issue over the years. Thanks for joining us, Helen Alvaré.
Thank you for having me, and all the best to you too.
God bless you.